Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Courtney Schulhoff. Courtney Schulhoff was born in 1987 in Florida to Steven and Tracy. While details about her childhood are limited, we do know that her parents divorced when she was young, which was a challenging experience for her. After the divorce, her mother moved out and Courtney stayed with her father. Eventually, Steven faced significant financial problems, which led to their move. In 2003, Courtney attended Lyman High School. She was a hardworking student at first, but after her parents divorced, her grades began to drop rapidly. She rarely attended school, stopped trying, and became a poor student. Outside of school, Courtney's personality also changed. She began hanging out with a group of friends who were known for bad behavior, which negatively affected her. Tensions between Courtney and her father Steven escalate, forcing her to temporarily move in with her mother Tracy. However, this arrangement does not last long. Tracy cannot accept the changes in Courtney, so Steven has no choice but to welcome her back home. Once again, Courtney and her father face unresolved issues, including her difficulties with school. During this time, Courtney and her friends often gather at the racetrack across from her school, where she meets and begins dating a 20-year-old college student named Michael. Michael Morin was a former high school football player who, unlike Courtney, had performed well academically. He received straight A's and was now attending a nearby college. His parents had high expectations for him, but everything changed after he met Courtney. After a few weeks of talking, they began spending all their free time together. Courtney's father, Steven, was extremely upset about her poor grades, and this only intensified when he learned about her decision to be with Michael. He quickly started blaming Michael for this choice. Their relationship was already strained, and this situation made it worse. Courtney felt that her father didn't want her to be happy. She tried to explain that Michael was a good person, but Steven refused to see him in that way. He had heard rumors about Michael being involved in car theft and wanted to caution Courtney that no matter what Michael did, he would never earn her father's approval. After a series of arguments, Courtney began to accuse her father of being abusive, and there was some evidence to support her accusations. One day, when Courtney invited some friends over, including Michael, her father Steven came home earlier than expected, leading to an altercation. While Courtney and her friends were drinking and smoking, Steven suddenly entered the room. Enraged, he yelled at his daughter for throwing a party without his permission. After a brief argument, Steven punched Courtney in the face in front of her friends. The situation between Courtney and her father, Steven, remained tense. Although Courtney had stopped going to school, she refused to find a job and frequently used her father's credit card without asking. She would come home with new clothes and items purchased online. By this time, Steven's financial situation had worsened, making things even more challenging. For several months, Courtney continued her troubling behavior, often sneaking Michael into their home at night while her father was asleep. Eventually, Steven prohibited Courtney from seeing her boyfriend, but she ignored his wishes and invited Michael over whenever she pleased. Every conversation between Courtney and her father focused on his harsh criticism of Michael. As the months passed, the situation became increasingly difficult. One day, Steven checked his bank account and noticed some money missing. He called the police, reporting his daughter to them, apparently to teach her a lesson. After speaking with the police, Courtney returned home, now much more afraid of her father. She began to see him as strict, unkind, and a real threat. She devised a plan, determined to break free from Steven's control. By the end of 2003, Steven was in a relationship with a woman named Elaine. During this same time, Courtney was working towards earning her high school diploma while continuing to date Michael. Frustrated by Courtney's father's efforts to control their relationship, the couple decided to run away. However, they faced a major obstacle. Neither had a car or any money. Their plan was to take Michael's father's car and drive to Maryland, where they could ask Courtney's grandparents for financial assistance. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Michael stole his father's car, but while on the way to Maryland, they changed their minds and turned back home. This decision led to serious consequences for both Michael and Courtney. Michael's parents reported him to the police, and he was charged with car theft, resulting in a 70-day. Furthermore, Michael's parents insisted that he end his relationship with Courtney, believing it to be detrimental to him. This relationship was indeed harmful to both of them. Michael was forced to break up with Courtney, but he refused. As a result, his parents decided to kick him out of the house, leaving him homeless. He began sneaking into Courtney's apartment to sleep there, something he had done occasionally before, but now happened every night. Additionally, Michael dropped out of college, changed his address to Steven's, and put Steven's phone number on his parole application without Steven's involvement or permission. Although Michael had nowhere to live, he made no attempt to find a job, which left Courtney to pay all of her father's credit card bills. When Steven attempted to talk to his daughter about her mounting debt, an unforeseen tragedy struck first. On February 10, 2004, Elaine, Steven's new girlfriend, attempted to call him multiple times, but he didn't answer. Concerned that something might be wrong, she decided to go to his house. Between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m., she drove to his place and was surprised by what she saw. Michael, Courtney's boyfriend, was walking down the street with Steven's dog, wearing one of Steven's t-shirts. Feeling uneasy, Elaine got out of her car and approached the front door of Steven's house, where she found Courtney standing by the entrance. Elaine tried to enter, but the door was locked. She asked Courtney where her father was, but Courtney said she didn't know and left without opening the door, taking the key with her. Elaine saw that Steven's truck was still parked in its usual spot, which made her even more worried, so she decided to call the police. When the local police arrived, they quickly obtained a search warrant following Elaine's phone call. They entered the house through the back door and began their search, uncovering a horrific scene. Inside Steven's room, they found blood splatter on the walls. The most shocking discovery was Steven's body in a plastic trash can. He had a severed ear and a disfigured face. It was clear that the perpetrator didn't bother to hide their actions. Additionally, the police found several bank statements on the dining room table, many of them circled in pen. Meanwhile, Courtney was missing. Elaine learned of the altercation between Steven, his daughter, and her boyfriend, so the police quickly began a search. The police found Michael in the restroom of the mall across the street from Steven's house. As Elaine said, he was wearing one of Steven's t-shirts and had Steven's wallet, car keys, and credit cards in his possession. The police took Michael in for questioning. After leaving her father's apartment earlier that day, Courtney simply went to her mother's house, where her mother made her turn herself in. During questioning, Michael initially insisted that he knew nothing about the murder. Michael claimed that after being kicked out of the house, he had been living in Courtney's closet. One day, when Steven returned home, Courtney woke Michael up and told him that her father had found out he was staying with them. When he asked Courtney why, she said she would explain later and asked him to walk the dog, which he did. Michael ran to the mall because he was worried that Steven would find out he was near his home. However, after the police informed him of Steven's death, his story changed dramatically. He began to cry and said that after Steven tried to confront Courtney about the missing money on his credit card, she asked Michael to kill Steven and he agreed. His story shifts from being unaware of the death to saying he was asked to kill Steven. Courtney's interrogation was also unproductive. She gave two different statements. In her first interrogation, she blamed Michael entirely, claiming she had no knowledge of her father's death until he informed her. In a later confession, however, she revealed much more information to police. Courtney maintained that the murder was Michael's idea and admitted to helping him by removing Steven's dog from the room before the incident and placing the bat by the bedroom door. She said she heard everything while Michael killed her father. But by the end of the trial in September 2006, her story had changed dramatically. Courtney was convicted of murder. When asked if she had any final statements, she maintained her innocence throughout the trial but stated that she wanted to publicly acknowledge that Michael Morin did not kill her father. She took full responsibility and agreed to her sentence. This shocking admission took everyone in the courtroom by surprise. However, Courtney's stance changed less than a year later. At Michael's trial in April 2007, where he faced the death penalty if convicted, Courtney did not repeat her previous statement that she was solely responsible for the crime and that Michael had nothing to do with it. Ultimately, Michael Morin was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. In 2017, Courtney Schulhoff was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Although both men involved were punished, the exact details of the case remain unclear. It was confirmed that Steven was killed with a baseball bat. But it is still unclear which of the two did the killing. Courtney did not confess to killing her father, but Michael did. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing case. The case of David Viennes. In California, a man jumped off a cliff into the raging waves. A woman who knew him watched in amazement. The jumper was David Viennes, a successful businessman and celebrity chef who owned a popular restaurant chain. What could have motivated such a successful man to take such a drastic action? The situation was more complicated than it seemed, as David was the prime suspect in a serious criminal case at the time of his jump. According to his friends, David Viennes was charismatic, intelligent, and attracted attention wherever he went. David began dating Dawn in the early 90s while working as a chef at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. At the time, he had 3 children from previous relationships who lived with their mother, but he remained involved in their lives. David focused on the future, leaving behind his past problems and mistakes. David and Dawn's relationship progressed quickly, leading to their marriage in 1997. At that time, David owned a successful chain of restaurants, which provided him with both fame and a stable income. They tied the knot in Lomita, California, a small town with a population of 20,000 known for its safety and low crime rates, making it an ideal setting for their wedding. A close family friend, Joko Knights, who ran a small auto repair shop, became someone they trusted deeply. Through their friendship, Joko learned some private details about their lives, including that David had a domineering personality and that Dawn sometimes struggled with alcohol. Dawn's addiction escalated to the point where she began drinking early in the morning, hiding the bottles so her husband wouldn't find out she had been drinking. She drank to cope with David's cruelty. To hide her finances from her husband, she asked a family friend named Joe to keep her money. According to him, she last gave him money on October 18, 2009. And Dawn had saved over $1,000. The following Monday, Dawn did not show up for work. Her car was parked near her house, but she was missing. Worried, Joe asked David where his wife was, and David replied that she had left the house. He explained that she felt pressured by her husband, so she wanted to go to alcohol withdrawal. Joe is skeptical of David's answer. He begins to monitor David's behavior and realizes that Katie Galvin, one of the waitresses, is having an affair with him. Katie used to work at David's restaurant, and she is now trying to replace Dawn. Dawn is still unreachable, her phone is turned off, and her car is still parked at home. This raises the question, where could Dawn have gone without a car? Joe observes that Dawn's belongings are thrown out. After failing to contact Dawn, her friends filed a police report. David kept telling everyone the same story. They had an argument, and she left, taking only her expensive Louis Vuitton bag. It was strange that she left her car behind, since it was necessary to get around in that small town, which had no airport or train station. She would have needed her own transportation to leave. It seemed unlikely that a rich woman like Dawn would take the intercity bus. While investigating David's past, police found out that he was not only a skilled cook but also sold large quantities of weed. He had been involved in this activity before 2009. His restaurant business was thriving, so he didn't need to closely oversee it. This gave him the opportunity to focus on distributing drugs to small dealers. In 2005, David was arrested for drug trafficking, revealing that this was not his first offense. He had been convicted of similar activities in 1993. David worked as a police informant, always available and assisting when needed. This cooperation led to the dismantling of a citywide drug trafficking network, for which he served only 1 year in prison. In 2008, after being released from prison, David got married and moved to Lomita with Dawn, where they lived until the unfortunate events of 2009. When his wife mysteriously disappeared, he asked his daughter, Jackie, to accompany him to the restaurant to help with the business. Jackie helped with the business, while Katie was his mistress and aspired to be Mrs. David in the future. Jackie was 19 years old at the time. David kept telling everyone the same story about his wife, Dawn's disappearance, that they had a fight and she left him. However, Jackie suspected that her father was not telling the truth. Jackie directly asked her father where Dawn was. David shocked her by admitting that he had accidentally killed Dawn and asked his daughter to keep quiet and not call the police. Jackie agreed. Meanwhile, the police began to suspect David. In response, he took drastic action by asking his new girlfriend Katie to send text messages from Dawn's phone, pretending that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. David thought that once the police saw these messages, they would close the case. However, these messages only raised suspicions. This was because Dawn always signed her messages with the nickname Pixie, but Katie made a mistake and wrote the nickname wrong. The police obtained a search warrant for the David family home and conducted an inspection. They discovered blood in the bedroom and another room, but the stains were old and showed signs of attempted removal, making them unusable as evidence. 16 months after the Dawn's disappearance, it was impossible to find proof of the David's guilt. Although the police were almost certain that the David had killed Dawn, they lacked solid evidence against him. The only lead was the blood found in the house, which ultimately led nowhere. Reporters closely followed the case from the beginning, as it was a novel event in the area. This media attention benefited the investigation by keeping the suspect on edge, as people under pressure tend to make mistakes. One day, a reporter visited a restaurant and loudly claimed that David's entire house was covered in blood. This was a bluff. But it had the effect. David became anxious, and the reporter was expelled from the restaurant. The police decided to question David's daughter, Jackie. 2 police officers met her and took a confession from her. Jackie told them what had happened and then called her father, warning him that the police would be coming to arrest him until a warrant was issued. The press learned of the details and published the story on February 23, 2011. Overwhelmed, David confessed everything to his girlfriend, Katie Galvin. He claimed it was an accident and expressed that he did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison, saying that ending his life was the better option. After saying this, he rushed to his car, and Katie followed him. Despite the situation, Katie felt calm, believing that he would not harm her. They reached the cliff where David had left Katie in the car. He ran and jumped off the cliff. Amazingly, the 25-meter fall was not fatal for David. He survived. However, David's body had many broken bones. He was rescued from the cliff by a helicopter and taken to the hospital. If he had jumped head first, he would have died, but fate had other plans. A few days later, he confessed to the police from his hospital bed. He mentioned that the most recent conflict with his wife was due to Dawn's bad habits. She was not only abusing alcohol but also addicted to illegal drugs. His daughter confirmed his testimony. David explained that their conflict on the night of the incident was due to illegal substances. He came home after midnight, exhausted from working 90 hours a week. All he wanted was to relax, but he anticipated that his wife would return under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Since she wasn't home yet, he locked the bedroom door to avoid being disturbed and went to sleep. Later, when his wife returned and tried to enter the bedroom, he told her to sleep in another room and not to bother him. The Dawn became angry and burst into the bedroom, breaking the lock, and started hitting David in the face. Afterwards, she ran into the living room. David followed Dawn, saw the substances she had, took them away, and threw them in the sink. In response, she acted aggressively and lunged at him. To protect himself, David used table tape to bind her hands to prevent her from moving, attacking, or throwing anything at him. He mentioned that he had to deal with his wife's psychoses this way more than once. He restrained her and left her there until the effects of the substances faded. While she screamed in anger, David just wanted peace and ended up taping her mouth shut. He went to bed around 3 in the morning. In the morning, as was his habit, he rolled over to his wife's side but found her gone. He fell asleep again, forgetting that she was still tied up in the living room. When he woke up and went downstairs, he found Dawn dead. David realized that under the influence of drugs, she had started to feel nauseous and choked because her mouth was taped shut. In despair, he felt that his life was over. But he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he decided to dispose of her body. He carefully packed it and took it to his restaurant. David describes how he used a large vat in the restaurant to dip his wife in water and boil her for 4 days to tenderize the meat. He then cut her body into pieces, put them in garbage bags, and dumped them in a dumpster. When the garbage truck collects the restaurant's food waste, the remains of a boiled human being would likely go unnoticed because they would be unrecognizable. It is hard to understand how this could have happened when the restaurant was open at the time. During the investigation, restaurant staff claimed that they did not remember anything suspicious. The story seemed unbelievable and many people doubted David's testimony. Nearly 2 years later, David, now in a wheelchair, appeared in court. After the first hearing, he dismissed his lawyer, believing that the lawyer was not effectively handling his case. The prosecution suggested a possible motive for the murder. David had previously complained that Dawn had stolen about $200 from the restaurant cash register. During the trial, David claimed that after 17 years of marriage, he would never intentionally harm his wife, especially over such a small amount of money. He found it ridiculous to be charged with first-degree murder for such a trivial reason. David maintained that he had always provided for his wife, buying her expensive clothes. However, the prosecutor portrayed David as a cold-blooded and cruel killer who had planned the murder in advance. The Dawn feared her husband and saved money to leave him, but she ran out of time. The jury deliberated for over 5 hours on the case. David Viennes was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2023 after serving 15 years. Currently, he remains incarcerated but could be released at any time. The remains of Dawn Viennes have never been located. Despite extensive searches at the dump, David claimed he hit his wife's skull and jawbone in his mother's attic, but the police were unable to find any evidence there. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Janet Abaroa. For many people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, it can be very challenging to find a partner who will be a supportive and ideal husband and father. Unfortunately, love can sometimes cloud judgment, leading to relationships with people who are far from perfect and may even become a source of distress. Janet Abaroa was born on June 19, 1979, in a small town in Virginia. She was the seventh child in a large family that practiced the Mormon faith, which played a significant role in their lives from a young age. Janet was strong, independent, friendly, and intelligent. She had a deep love for children and always dreamed of becoming a mother. In high school, she played football and basketball and participated in swimming. During college, she continued to play sports for local teams, especially representing the University of Southern Virginia. In 1998, at a college game, Janet met a young football player named Raven, who played for the Southern Virginia men's team. Their relationship quickly turned into a love affair. Although Janet was friendly and outgoing, she was careful to adhere to her religious beliefs and kept her distance. Their relationship lasted for 2 years until Raven proposed to Janet. At the time, Janet was 20 years old and Raven was a year younger. They married in August 2000. To become financially independent, they both took jobs as sales associates at a sporting goods store, which required them to relocate to Durham, North Carolina. The couple rented a house in the suburbs and started their new jobs right away. From the outside, they appeared to have a happy marriage, and friends and neighbors often regarded them as the perfect couple. However, like many relationships, much of their happiness was for show. The couple quickly started facing issues. Janet often told her family and friends that she suspected Raven was cheating on her with various women. At one point, she left their home for a few days but eventually returned. This situation was very challenging for Janet, as she had always dreamed of a strong, loving family and valued loyalty. She felt devastated because she truly loved her husband and did not want to end their relationship. Compounding her difficulties, Janet discovered she was pregnant shortly after Raven admitted to cheating. Although she had always wanted a large family and was excited about the news, Raven's betrayal left her feeling overwhelmed and scared. She did not want to be a single mother. During her pregnancy, Janet grew close to her neighbors and made several friends among them. These friends even spoke to her husband, Raven, urging him to stop cheating on his pregnant wife. It seemed their words had an impact, as he promised to be a better husband. However, Janet remained unsure of the sincerity of his promises, given his history of deceit. Despite her concerns, life appeared to return to normal, especially after the birth of their son, Caden, on October 17, 2004. He became the center of Janet's world. The young family was struggling financially during a crisis. Janet, the mother, had stopped earning an income, leaving Raven as the only provider. However, his salary as a seller was not enough to support 3 people. Their landlord recognized their difficulties and agreed to postpone their rent for 3 months, understanding that the baby would add to their expenses. Despite this support, the couple still faced financial challenges, prompting them to seek assistance from the local church, which helped them in December 2004. The situation took a turn for the worse when their son was just 2 months old. Raven was arrested for stealing merchandise from the sporting goods store where he and Janet worked. He had stolen several tracksuits and sold them online, resulting in over $9,000 in losses for the store. As a consequence, Raven was fired, and overwhelmed by the shame of her husband's actions, Janet also decided to quit her job. Fortunately, Raven did not go to prison, but he was required to pay $10,000 in restitution to the store and received a 2-year probation sentence. Afterwards, Janet and Raven were both unemployed. They struggled financially. With a criminal record, Raven was unable to find regular work, but despite these challenges, the young family managed to make ends meet by working part-time. Janet's family received support from relatives while still holding down her part-time job. A few months later, they were faced with a devastating tragedy. On April 26, 2005, Janet picked up her son Caden from daycare to prepare dinner. That evening, her husband came home, they had dinner together, and after Janet and Caden fell asleep, he went to Mauriceville to attend a local mini-soccer game. When he returned home, he witnessed a horrifying scene. Janet was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Nearby, Caden was lying in his crib, fortunately, was not injured. In shock, Raven immediately called the police, reporting that his wife had been attacked and covered in blood, although he could not understand the extent of her injuries. He initially thought she had been shot. When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Janet had not been shot, but had been stabbed multiple times. She died instantly from a wound to her neck. Janet was murdered in a rented house in Gifts. Shockingly, she was pregnant and her unborn child was also killed. The police were horrified by the severity of the murder and needed to find out who could have committed such an act. After examining the crime scene, Janet's body was sent to the forensic laboratory. The autopsy revealed 3 deep stab wounds, one on her left hand, indicating that she had tried to defend herself. The fatal wound was to the neck, where the attacker had severed an artery, causing severe blood loss. With such injuries, Janet would have died within minutes. In addition, experts were unable to determine the exact time of death. At the crime scene, forensic scientists gathered a significant amount of evidence from the victim's body, which required thorough examination. Meanwhile, the police sought witnesses who might identify the likely perpetrator. Naturally, police first interviewed her husband, Raven Abaroa. He was called in for questioning multiple times. His statements helped piece together some of the events leading up to the brutal murder. He reported that on April 26, 2005, he left from Mauriceville to play a mini-football match and returned home at 10:40 p.m. When he called for his wife, she did not respond, so he went to the top-floor room. There, he found her murdered. Since Raven was away, it was difficult to determine when Janet was killed. The police began investigating potential suspects based on Raven's perspective. He theorized that he believed his wife may have chosen to end her life due to financial difficulties. Raven said that sometime before her death, Janet began to behave strangely. However, Janet's family and friends dismissed this idea. They knew her well and had never heard her express such thoughts. Furthermore, Janet was very religious and would never have considered such an act. At this point, police believed that Janet's death was not voluntary. The injuries she suffered could not have been self-inflicted. Additionally, there were clear signs that someone else was in the house at the time of the attack. A bloody shoe print and a single fingerprint were found near the body. The lack of broken windows or doors suggested that the victim had voluntarily allowed the attacker into the house. There were no signs of a struggle, except for defensive wounds on Janet's arm, suggesting that she had attempted to defend herself from a blow. The attack appeared sudden, especially since Raven said that Janet was asleep when he left. It was also unusual that nothing was stolen from the house except Raven's laptop and a few kitchen knives, which may have been used in the attack. The assassin did not take any other valuables, such as rings, jewelry, or expensive items. Therefore, it does not appear to have been a robbery. At that time, there was no solid evidence against the Raven, so he was released, although police started to investigate him more thoroughly. Following the incident, Raven's behavior became increasingly suspicious. Just a day later, he packed his belongings, took his son, and moved to Utah. This reaction seems understandable, as not every husband can stay in a house where such a violent murder took place. He needed the support of his loved ones, which is why he went to where his family lived. Raven's friends later commented that he did not act like someone who had lost a loved one. He did not seem to care about what had happened to his wife or who was responsible. Raven clearly had no intention of helping find the criminal or bring justice. He did not participate in distributing or preparing the reward notice or any other action taken by the police or the family. Instead, Raven simply left with the child and refused to cooperate further. The police observed that Raven was reluctant to cooperate at first and eventually ignored all requests, while Janet's family devoted all their free time to assisting the police. The police became suspicious when they discovered that shortly before the crime, Raven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy for Janet after her second pregnancy had begun. This was unusual because the family was facing significant financial difficulties and had never purchased such insurance before. Despite lacking funds for essential expenses, Raven managed to pay for the insurance premiums. Furthermore, the Raven contacted the insurance company to claim the payout soon after the attack, even before Janet was buried. All of this raised red flags, and suspicion mounted around the Raven. Police tried to get to know Raven and quickly realized that he had been dishonest from the beginning of his relationship with Janet. He claimed to be a devout Mormon and even said that he had been on a mission to Peru. This story was false. At the time, Raven lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he lived a quiet life after receiving his insurance money. During this time, he met Vanessa Pont, a single mother who lived nearby. They soon began dating. Raven was not like other men. His friendly demeanor set him special. He knows how to attract attention, quickly winning Vanessa over with his lies. He gains her trust by claiming that his wife died in a car accident. At the time, Raven is unaware that Janet's family is watching his every move. They discover his suspicious actions and are determined to find out what he will do next, hoping to gather evidence of his involvement in Janet's death. Janet's family quickly discovers that he lied about her death. But why would he tell almost everyone that his wife died in an accident? At first, Vanessa trusts him completely and doesn't want to know the details of Janet's fate. However, her curiosity eventually leads her to the truth. Janet was the victim of an unsolved murder, dead from 3 stab wounds. Despite this, Raven manages to fool the Vanessa. He repeatedly complains to her about the police and the public's obsession with blaming him for Janet's death, claiming he had nothing to do with it and that a robber killed his wife. Surprisingly, she believes him. Meanwhile, Janet's family contacts Vanessa, his fiancée. They warn her that Raven can be dangerous and advise her to stay away from him, but she ignores their concerns. She is charmed by him and puts her trust in him. After 3 years together, Vanessa and Raven married. Vanessa experienced Raven's mood swings and frequent tantrums, during which he lost control. His violent behavior left her in fear for her life. Their marriage ended abruptly, lasting only 4 months. As the pressure from the police continued, Raven decided to speak to the press. He expressed hope that the case would be solved and the killer found, so he could be left alone. At the same time, he completely denied any involvement in the crime. During this time, a new police took over the case, determined to ensure justice for the Janet's murder. Janet's family actively supported the police and cooperated with the investigation. In this context, Vanessa's anxiety increased. She frequently questioned whether her husband could have killed his first wife, leading her to doubt his honesty. Vanessa believed he was capable of such a terrible act. Subsequently, she spoke to the media, where she revealed that her ex-husband often acted inappropriately. She recalled the worst moment in their relationship occurring on Christmas 2018. During a dispute that Raven instigated, he locked Vanessa in the bathroom and expressed his desire to hit her, stating he hated her and wouldn't care if she died. This incident marked a turning point that led to their breakup. Vanessa admitted she was very afraid of Raven and believed he would easily harm her, just as he likely did with his ex-wife. The new police believe that Raven is responsible for this crime. The main challenge is Raven's alibi for the night of the murder. Around the time Janet was attacked, he was at the stadium playing mini soccer, and several witnesses have confirmed this. Furthermore, shoe prints found at the scene do not match Raven's shoes, and bloody fingerprints on the door do not belong to Raven. However, there is something troubling about his behavior. The police called Raven to ask him a few questions over the phone. Raven repeated his story, but he did not remember many details. This raised suspicions. Raven claimed the knife had gone missing from his home on the night of the attack, discovered during a move. He said that the police did not find the knives because they did not conduct a thorough investigation, which made him doubt their ability to catch the criminal. Meanwhile, the police believed that they had not missed anything because forensic experts had spent a lot of time carefully examining the crime scene. For years, the investigation was unsuccessful. However, circumstantial evidence pointed to Raven as a suspect. Police spoke with Raven's former girlfriends, all of whom described him as very aggressive and prone to violence. Police also discovered that on the evening of the attack, Raven locked his dog in the garage, something he had never done before. Police believed this action was significant, thinking that Raven may have feared that the dog would protect Janet and prevent him from committing the crime or attract attention to the house by barking. Police discovered that the day before the crime, the Raven transferred data from his laptop to another storage device. This raised suspicions of premeditated murder since the laptop was reportedly stolen. On February 1, 2010, based on this circumstantial evidence, the Raven Abaroa was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder and extradited to North Carolina. However, the evidence against him was insufficient, being entirely circumstantial, so police continued to gather more evidence for the trial. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they thoroughly examined the photos and the victim's body. The police noticed an open, empty contact lens case on the table next to the bed. This suggested that the Janet might have been wearing her lenses at the time of the crime. However, her parents insisted that she never went to bed with her lenses in. She always removed them before sleeping. This begs the question, was Janet killed before she went to bed and before he left? The forensic expert who conducted the autopsy overlooked whether the Janet was wearing contact lenses, but this was not intentional. Forensic scientists sometimes miss certain details because they seem irrelevant to the case. In this instance, however, the presence or absence of contact lenses could have been crucial evidence against Raven's falsehood. To verify this theory, exhuming the body became necessary. Janet's family supported the idea of exhumation, as they were determined to prove the criminal's guilt and seek justice for their loved one. In July 2010, the body was exhumed, and forensic experts discovered remnants of contact lenses in the eye, although the material was dry and disfigured. However, to convince the jury, a formal examination was needed. It was necessary to verify that the contact lens actually belonged to the Janet. To achieve this, a comprehensive study was conducted over the course of a year. Specialists used pig eyes fitted with contact lenses and subjected them to an embalming process similar to that used on human bodies before burial. The results of the experiments supported the initial hypotheses, confirming that at the time of the murder, Janet was indeed wearing contact lenses, indicating she had not gone to bed. This evidence contradicted the Raven claims. Raven Abaroa's trial began in 2013 and attracted considerable public attention, receiving extensive media coverage. Many people attended the trial. The jury was given detailed information about the facts of the case. Before the trial began, the prosecutor's office stated that they believed Raven was definitely guilty, although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The case was brought to the Supreme Court based largely on circumstantial evidence. However, there was a large body of material that should have convinced a jury of Raven's guilt. Friends and family of Janet said that just a month before her death, she had expressed concerns about her husband. She mentioned that he had serious anger issues and often lost his temper and control. Janet repeatedly expressed her fear of Raven and said she intended to leave him. Janet's mother said she often witnessed heated arguments between the couple. In interviews with police, Raven admitted to having numerous arguments with his wife but adamantly denied any wrongdoing. During the trial, the defense pointed out to the jury that police initially focused on evidence pointing to Raven's guilt, ignoring other potential suspects, and ignored several pieces of evidence. First, a pair of footprints were found at the crime scene that did not belong to Raven. Second, a bloodstain was found on the front door, the DNA of which also did not match Raven. The third important clue that was overlooked was a shoe print that the criminal would have left when he stepped in Janet's blood near the body. The prosecution then relied on the fact that Raven was manipulative, prone to violence, and subject to sudden mood swings. One of Raven's girlfriends expressed her concerns about Raven's potential mental health issues. It was clear that he was cruel and manipulative by nature, frequently communicating with other girls behind the scenes. This behavior suggested that he may have planned the murder carefully and may have misled the police. The lover then recounted an incident where Raven forced her to have sex in a car parked on the side of the road. He acted so aggressively that she had no choice but to comply. She even deliberately left a strand of her hair in the car as evidence in case anything happened to her. One possible motive for the murder, according to the prosecutor, was Janet's unexpected pregnancy. She had only shared this news with a few close people, including some of her sisters. While Janet was excited about becoming a mother, she did not view her husband as the ideal father for the child. Given their challenging financial situation, the prosecution suggested that this news could have provoked anger in Raven. During the investigation, a clear lie from the Raven emerged. Raven maintained that he found his wife dead when he spoke to the police. However, during a confession at a local church, he revealed that when he found her, she was still alive and even attempted to speak to him before losing dying. Police suspected that the Janet was involved in a relationship with another man. She intended to leave her husband and had begun communicating with her ex-boyfriend, Scott. However, their messages suggested that they had only recently started talking and that there was no romantic relationship between them. In March 2014, Raven entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to manslaughter for killing his wife. As a result, he received a 10-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Custody of their son was given to Janet's family. Raven was released from prison on Christmas Day 2017. He returned to Utah and still lives there to this day. Janet's family was outraged by the sentence, as Janet can never return, while her husband continues to live his life. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, two men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Assunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Assunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Assunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Assunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Assunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Assunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Assunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Assunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Assunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Assunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed her life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Assunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Assunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Assunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Assunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th. The day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Assunta's teacher, she described Assunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Assunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Assunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Assunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Assunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Assunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, Their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, one usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club return to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case. creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24th. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18th, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m. with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Dickerson family. From the outside, the Dickerson family appeared perfect. They had everything needed for happiness, a loving mother and a devoted father who was willing to do anything for his family's well-being. Although they lived together in a small unit, they harbored many dark secrets that would surprise an outsider. For years, the Dickerson family faced deep-rooted issues that ultimately resulted in brutal murders. This tragic event took place in September 2021. One significant factor that contributed to this horrific outcome was depression, which can be devastating. Today, we will share one of the most heartbreaking stories from the criminal world. Lauren Dickerson, who lived in South Africa. She had a difficult childhood that made it hard for her to connect with teachers and other children. As a result, she often felt isolated and was frequently excluded from holidays and birthday celebrations. This experience contributed to mental health issues that began during her teenage years. Lauren is very anxious and struggles to control her emotions, always seeing threats in everyday situations. Despite her difficulties, she has had a passion for medicine since she was a child. After finishing school, she went to university and eventually became a general practitioner. In the following years, while working, Lauren met Graham, an orthopedic doctor, and they began dating. Despite their different medical specializations, they quickly developed a close bond and fell in love. Graham was outgoing and sociable, which complemented Lauren's more reserved nature. Their relationship seemed harmonious as they balanced each other's weaknesses. With Graham's influence, Lauren became more cheerful and open. They got married in May 2006. At that time, they lived in Pretoria, South Africa, where they built a house on nearly a hectare of land. The house had 4 bedrooms, a gym, a swimming pool. As they started their married life, Lauren shifted her career focus to gynecology and neurological diseases. However, almost from the beginning of her attempts to get pregnant, she decided to put her career on hold to have children. In 2012, Lauren returned to work at the medical center, but she was no longer a practicing physician. Instead, she became a part-time manager and her husband's assistant. The couple faced challenges conceiving due to health issues. Despite these difficulties, they were eager to have children. In 2013, they sought help from fertility specialists. After successful treatment, they welcomed a baby girl named Sarah, but she was born prematurely at 18 weeks. Sadly, Sarah did not survive. The loss was a shock to Lauren, who grieved every day for the next 2 months. The couple continued to consult with fertility specialists but continued to face challenges conceiving. Lauren underwent 17 rounds of IVF, often with low success rates. They eventually decided to use donor eggs and their first daughter, Leanne, was born. The family was very anxious during the pregnancy. Lauren feared another negative outcome and the possibility of losing the baby again. After Leanne was born, Lauren suffered from mental health issues. In 2015, doctors diagnosed her with anxiety, postpartum depression, and major depressive disorder when Leanne was just 18 months old. In response to the situation, Graham took a leave of absence to care for their daughter, and other family members stepped in to help. Following the doctor's advice, Lauren managed her illness with medication. Despite the challenges, the couple remained hopeful about having a second child, and after a few years, Lauren became pregnant again. An ultrasound revealed that she was expecting twins, which excited the parents as their family was set to grow. However, during the examination, they learned that one of the girls had a cleft palate, which caused Lauren significant anxiety. Fortunately, it was later discovered that the condition was not as serious as initially thought, which brought relief to Lauren's family. In 2018, twins Maya and Carla were born earlier than expected when they were in their 5th month. A successful surgery to correct the birth defect was performed. The family handled the ordeal well. After the surgery, Lauren and Graham decided to hire a nanny to help care for the family. The issues surrounding the birth left Lauren feeling anxious and compounded by panic attacks. Her husband Graham described her as an extremely anxious mother, constantly worrying about their children. Lauren was overprotective, often watching their every move, which irritated the kids. Despite these challenges, they managed to overcome many of the difficulties. The Dickinson family was relatively well off, allowing them to hire a maid, gardener, and nanny to help ease the stress on Lauren, who struggled with her mental health. By 2020, the Dickinson family had sold their house and land and moved abroad. They chose to rent a comfortable apartment. This new living situation has significantly improved their family relationships. For the first time in 10 years, Lauren stopped taking antidepressants. By March 2021, she was off all medications and had good mental health. This positive change inspired her to start doing CrossFit at least 3 times a week to stay in shape. In addition, she overcame her eating disorder. This change gave her a more positive outlook on life. Graham noticed positive changes in Lauren and was relieved that she seemed to have overcome her previous health problems. However, their happiness did not last long. By June 2021, Lauren's depression had returned. As a result, Lauren decided to see her psychiatrist again, who prescribed her antidepressants after she described feeling depressed and isolated. The Dickinson family was in a difficult situation. Graham was often home because he did not work, and the children became very attached to him, always wanting him around. As a result, Lauren felt left out and she often argued with her children, who preferred to be with their father. Although they appeared to be a happy family on the surface, things were actually very tense and could explode at any moment. In July 2021, South Africa experienced a series of riots that heightened Lauren's anxiety. The violent protests triggered panic within her family, prompting them to quickly decide to move to New Zealand, which they saw as a quieter and safer place. This move was also strategic, as Graham's parents lived there. However, their hopes were met with numerous challenges. Immigrating under such circumstances carried the risk of being denied a residence permit due to chronic illness or health conditions. To hide her struggles from the authorities, Lauren stopped taking her antidepressants shortly before the move. Her psychiatrist had told her that she was stable and no longer needed medication. Nevertheless, the pressure of the immigration process caused Lauren significant stress, worsened by her insomnia. She was only getting 2 hours of sleep each night because of the increased workload. Before the move, she began taking another medication in August 2021. The Dickinson family left South Africa on August 2nd. Lauren later described the trip as one of the most difficult times of her life, filled with anxiety about their future in New Zealand. Upon arriving in New Zealand, they settled in Timaru, a quiet town of about 30,000. The family's struggles continued. Their living conditions in New Zealand were not much better than in South Africa, with frequent power outages. In addition, Graham had to return to work earlier than expected, adding to the Dickinson family's stress. Graham started working at a hospital in Timaru and started his shift. Lauren hoped that they would have more time to deal with the challenges of moving house and adjusting to a new. Lauren felt overwhelmed with family issues and was left to care for 3 young children on her own without any support. On the appointed day, the Dickinson family went to the immigration office and were selected as potential citizens, while many other families faced rejection. Their application was accepted and they were told to wait for a response. The couple then went to a local Christian school to enroll their child in kindergarten. Graham noticed that during this time, Lauren seemed particularly sad, as if a dark cloud was hanging over her. She seemed far from the cheerful person who shared her life on social media. Even the smallest setback would send her spiraling deeper into depression. During this challenging period, Lauren kept in touch with her new friend Letitia through social media. She attempted to call Letitia, who had recently moved, to invite her to dinner, but her messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, Lauren and her spouse were looking for a rental property, but all the houses within their budget were in poor condition. They were temporarily staying in a house provided by the hospital, which only added to Lauren's stress as she was already feeling overwhelmed. However, on the night of September 14, 2021, Lauren had trouble sleeping. The next day, she had to take Maya and Carla to kindergarten and take Leanne to school. The morning was lively as the children, excited about their early rise and packing, chose their outfits without noticing Lauren's fatigue. After dropping them off at school, Lauren returned home and lay down to rest. At 10:47 a.m., she received a photo from her kindergarten teacher showing her twins eating lunch at their table. Then Lauren cleaned the house, organizing her belongings because her family had just moved here. After running errands all day, Lauren picked up the girls from daycare and school around 3 p.m. and took them to the playground. Later, at home, Carla threw a tantrum because she missed their dad, who was at work. The other twin, Maya, had recently fallen out of bed and hurt her stitches. The girls cried so much that Lauren felt like a bad mother, trying to comfort them when they ignored her attempts to comfort them. Lauren cooked chicken nuggets for the children, but they were not satisfied with the meal. This led to a breaking point for her. Feeling overwhelmed, Lauren bathed the children and put them to bed around 6 p.m. Although she received several messages from friends in South Africa, she did not have time to reply to all of them. Graham returned home from work, had a quick dinner, and then left for an important meeting at 7 p.m. While he was away, chaos erupted in the house. About 20 minutes after he left, the children began to scream. In an attempt to calm them down, Lauren went to the garage to get some zip ties. Lauren told the children they were going to weave a necklace and placed the zip ties around their necks. No idea what was going on and were happily playing along. However, Leanne was angry with her mother and criticized what she was doing. For Leanne, it was not a game. In a fit of rage, Lauren began suffocating her children with pillows and blankets. She said that she was very sick and would soon die, and that she was killing her children because she was afraid that no one would take care of them. After Lauren believed the children were dead, she attempted to end your life. Lauren cut herself with a knife, but the blade was too dull to cut deeply. Ultimately, she resorted to pills, consuming several large doses of various medications. But these were not enough to end her life. In a moment of confusion, Lauren collapsed on the kitchen floor, lost in her thoughts about her actions. At that moment, Graham came home. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked if she was okay, but she responded in a way he couldn't understand. Sensing something was very wrong, he rushed upstairs to check on the kids. Going up to the room, he hoped everything was okay, but instead, he found the lifeless bodies of his children on the bed. The horrifying reality unfolded before his eyes. In desperation, he sought help. With the help of colleagues at a nearby hospital, he ran out into the street to meet one of them. As he closed the door behind him, the last thing he saw was Lauren lying on the floor with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was alive, his only concern was his daughters. So he didn't check on Lauren. A friend at the hospital tried to revive the children, but their efforts were in vain. Around 9:40 p.m., neighbors heard a loud noise, which turned out to be a door slamming as Graham rushed outside. Soon after, they heard sobbing and screaming coming from the house. Graham approached the house and admitted that everything was his fault. He was distressed about leaving the children with their mother, who was not mentally stable. Neighbors called emergency services, and the police and ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. Officers discovered the bodies of the murdered children in the house. The twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and their 6-year-old, Leanne, had been killed. In the kitchen, police found Lauren alive and conscious. She answered their questions but spoke very softly. The Lauren appeared to be in shock. The police discovered shallow cuts on her hands and forearms. When asked if she had used any illegal drugs that evening, she denied it. Later, police found 9 medication bottles in her trash, along with a package containing hundreds of cable ties. A toxicological examination revealed that her blood did not contain any illegal drugs or alcohol, but it did show high levels of antidepressants, sedatives, and other medications. 40-year-old Lauren was promptly arrested and taken to the hospital for help. The brutal murders of the Dickinson family shocked the local community and then spread throughout New Zealand and South Africa. The nanny who worked for the family was speechless when she heard the news. She struggled to accept that it was true. In an interview, the nanny described Lauren, Graham, and their children as an ideal family, saying that she had never witnessed any arguments or conflicts within their household. The nanny firmly believed that Lauren loved her children deeply. She last saw the children in June 2021, when the Dickinson family was excited about moving to New Zealand. After Lauren was taken into custody, Graham had to return to South Africa because his visa was expiring in December 2021. He later returned to participate in the trial. He communicated with Lauren and found it hard to believe that she had harmed the children. The day after her arrest, Lauren woke up in the hospital. She was in disbelief about her situation and was even more shocked, and the police entered her room and accused her of killing 3 girls. On September 18th, Lauren Dickinson was officially charged with triple murder. Lauren admitted to the crime but stated that she did not want to harm her children. She explained that her actions stemmed from her mental instability and the overwhelming challenges she faced as a mother. Lauren expressed feelings of inadequacy in her parenting, struggling to manage her children, who were often screaming. Eventually, the stress became unbearable for her. She recounted how she killed her children, first Carla, then Leanne, and finally Maya, using pillows and blankets to suffocate them. Although Lauren denied experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, her lawyer requested a psychiatric evaluation following the preliminary court hearing. During this time, Lauren refused to eat and lost weight, dropping to 47 kilograms. Her physical and mental health issues delayed the case for a month, leading to the rescheduling of the hearing for July 2023, nearly 2 years after the tragic events. In court, Lauren's lawyers sought to focus on her mental health struggles as part of their defense strategy. New Zealand law is very lenient towards those who commit crimes against children, especially in cases of manslaughter, where the offender can receive a suspended sentence. It was important for the defense to show that Lauren's actions were a response to extreme stress, showing that she considered killing her child a form of self-defense. The trial began on July 17, 2023, and lasted 4 weeks. Attorneys have said that Lauren had suffered from years of health problems and struggled with depression. Her mental health struggles led her to consider killing her daughter as a way to deliverance. Tensions had recently escalated between Lauren and her children. They often disobeyed her, which led her to resort to physical punishment and consider sedatives. During the trial, Graham revealed that Lauren had raised concerns about the children's safety on 3 separate occasions, but he had not taken them seriously. Each time he left the house, he felt remorse. In May 2019, Lauren expressed a desire to smother their daughters with pillows. In July 2011, she mentioned wanting to cut their femoral arteries in the bathroom. Despite these alarming statements, they were not considered serious at the time. Lauren has a hard time managing her spoiled twins, expressing her frustration by saying, "Children drive she crazy. They are wild, brazen, and disobedient. She tired of them. She wish I could start over and make different choices." Lauren had to face many difficulties to become a parent, making it difficult for others to believe that she could hurt the children. During the trial, Graham described her difficulties in raising her children. He rarely saw her show affection to her children, and they did not seem to seek her out. This became especially evident when he was home more often and the children clung to him, leaving Lauren without the opportunity to play with them. He sensed something was wrong, but attributed it to her withdrawn personality and inability to participate in fun activities. Graham mentioned that New Zealand did not meet Lauren's expectations. The new country felt completely different from what she had envisioned. This led to a significant cultural shock from everything she encountered. Graham expressed forgiveness towards his wife, believing she was overwhelmed by the challenges she faced. He urged others to forgive her and pray for Lauren. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office aimed to demonstrate that the triple murder was premeditated. They presented evidence showing that the actions were methodical and intentional, including search engine queries. Lauren had repeatedly searched for lethal doses of various medications for children and methods of strangulation. Additionally, she had confided her disturbing plans to family members on several occasions. The prosecutor argued that the Lauren was frustrated and angry with her children because she felt unable to manage them and was resentful towards them, believing that the girls negatively impacted her relationship with her husband. Psychiatrists confirmed that the Lauren was likely in an unstable mental state at the time of the crime. Experts noted that Lauren was experiencing significant anxiety during this period. On August 14, 2013, the jury began reviewing the evidence in the case, which included hundreds of pages of research reports and documents from police and experts. After initial deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on Lauren's guilt. They returned to the office to review detailed police footage of the victim's parents, which took more than 15 hours and lasted 2 days. On August 16, after a hearing at Christchurch, Lauren's attorney, and Tui, said the best place for Lauren to serve her sentence was in hospital, a placement that all 3 mental health professionals who evaluated her agreed with. Lauren Dickinson will be detained at hospital pending assessment before a sentencing date is finalized. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Aisling Murphy. Aisling Murphy, born in 1998, was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family lived in Blue Ball, Ireland, a peaceful town about an hour's drive from Dublin. Aisling grew up in a loving environment, influenced by her father's passion for music, particularly the bagpipes and violin. Inspired by him, she began studying traditional Irish music. She joined a youth choir in school and later became part of an orchestra, performing folk music at various events across Ireland and Great Britain. She was talented, independent, and sociable, which allowed her to integrate well with her team and feel comfortable on stage. After graduating from school, Aisling quickly sought employment. She was determined to achieve complete independence from her parents, so she began searching for full-time job opportunities right after receiving her diploma. Despite her career ambitions, she continued to nurture her love for music. She often performed for her relatives during special family gatherings on weekends, which further strengthened their connections. Aisling wanted to create her own family someday, but first, she focused on establishing herself. She went to college and became a first-grade teacher at a school where she had previously studied. This moment in her life was very meaningful. The teachers and students appreciated Aisling for her energy, kindness, and creativity. Aisling was truly suited for this role due to her strong moral character. She made a smooth transition from being an excellent student to becoming a wonderful teacher. Aisling was friendly, well-mannered, sweet, and self-assured. During her first week of work, she taught music on weekends, showing her passion for her job and her enjoyment of working with children. At 28, she had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Ryan, for over 6 years. They met when Aisling was just 15. Initially, their romance didn't last, and they broke up after a few months. However, they eventually reunited, realizing that they were too young when they first started dating as teenagers. Their feelings for each other reignited, and they fell deeply in love, often talking about their future, including marriage and children. They had planned a trip in 2 days, but unfortunately, it seemed their dreams would not come to fruition. Aisling finished her workday and planned to go for a run along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. This was a routine activity for her, as she enjoyed fitness and outdoor recreation. She loved walking or running in beautiful locations, so she often visited the canal when she could. The Grand Canal was a popular spot for runners, featuring a designated path for walking. It was usually busy, which made Aisling comfortable going there alone. After work, Aisling got ready for her run. She first went home to change her clothes and tell her mother about her schedule. Her mother reassured her daughter that she was old enough to take care of herself and that there was no danger in this. Aisling left, and that was the last time her mother saw her alive. About an hour after Aisling left home, 2 runners warming up along the Grand Canal called for help. They were running on one side of the canal and saw a man attacking a girl on the opposite bank. Since they didn't have mobile phones, they ran to the nearest payphone to report the incident. They informed the emergency dispatcher that they had witnessed a threatening man assaulting one of the female runners. The witnesses confirmed that the victim was still alive when the attacker dragged her into the bushes. She screamed and fought back, desperately trying to push him away, but she was clearly outmatched. The dispatchers sent police officers to the specified location. Upon arrival, the police and a witness found the body of a young woman at the canal. The young girl, who showed no signs of life, was found to have been severely beaten, as the caller had reported. She had been pulled off the paved road and into the bushes, where she suffered physical abuse. Her face and neck were covered in cuts, and her hair was matted with dried blood. Paramedics arrived and attempted to resuscitate her for 10 minutes, but they were unable to save her and confirmed her death. While the exact cause of death remained unclear, it was evident she had been beaten badly. The body of the murdered girl was sent for an autopsy, which revealed stab and cut wounds on her neck. A forensic expert identified 11 injuries, primarily on the right side of her neck, including a cut throat that rendered her unable to call for help. Signs of possible strangulation were also found. The victim was identified as Aisling Murphy. On her hands, there were deep cuts, likely sustained during a struggle. Keys were discovered near her body, and it was determined she had used them defensively, gripping them tightly in an effort to fight off her attacker. The weapon used in the attack did not inflict enough damage to prevent the criminal from continuing his assault. Aisling died from severe blood loss caused by multiple stab wounds to her neck, leading to her death within minutes. Near her body, police found sunglasses and a mobile phone in her jacket pocket. An abandoned bicycle was also found nearby, likely belonging to the attacker. The criminal had already fled the scene after harming his innocent victim. The brutality of the attack was shocking, especially since it occurred in broad daylight in a crowded area with witnesses. 2 runners who were in the vicinity witnessed the crime. They observed both the attack and the assailant. They provided vital information to the police. The first witness, Emma, reported that she was walking her dog by the Grand Canal when she noticed a girl jogging. She saw a man on a bright green bicycle closely following the jogger. Initially, Emma thought they might be running together because the cyclist stayed so close to the girl. She described the cyclist as looking like a migrant, not Irish. He had yellowish skin, a short haircut, and was wearing a black tracksuit with red logos. Later, Emma met another witness, Jenna, and together they witnessed the cyclist attack the girl. The attack appeared sudden and unprovoked. Jenna witnessed the attack and provided a detailed account. Her description matched that of another witness, who reported that the victim screamed, threatening the attacker, but then suddenly fell silent. This silence was caused by a wound to Aisling's neck that severely severed her vocal cords. Later, Jenna screamed loudly, threatening to call the police. Despite the threats, the attacker did not let go of the victim. Police found a green bicycle near the trail that belonged to the attacker. Meanwhile, police gathered more evidence and discovered that Aisling had been wearing a fitness tracker while running. The device recorded her body metrics, including speed, distance, and heart rate, helping to clarify the details surrounding her death. The data showed that Aisling started running at 2:51 p.m., and before that, GPS records showed she had parked her bike near the canal. After that, her pulse was around 100 beats per minute, indicating she was in an active phase. She maintained this heart rate until 15:21, during which she ran approximately 3 kilometers. However, after 15:21, her heart rate changed. The Aisling experienced erratic fluctuations, and GPS data showed she was standing still at that time. This was clearly when she was attacked, and by 15:31, her heart had stopped beating. The next step for the police was to review footage from surveillance cameras in the area. Police identified the locations of all recording devices, hoping to find video that would show the suspect, the victim, and the attack itself. Police checked surveillance cameras, focusing on the time frame between 12:25 and 16:05, and were able to identify a man who matched the witness description exactly. It appeared that he was moving randomly along the roads. They determined that this man had appeared long before Ashling's arrival and was using a bicycle identical to the one found at the crime scene. The prime suspect was wearing a black hoodless jacket and sweatpants with stripes down the side, and also had a red logo on his clothes, as Emma described. He had been following a woman in a dark burgundy jacket but was later spotted by her. He had been looking at the victim with interest, but for some unknown reason he quickly fell behind. In footage from another camera, the suspect stops at 1:53 p.m. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out an object. He is seen holding and twisting something in his hand, but the poor quality of the footage makes it difficult to determine what it is. Police suspect he pulled out a knife, which he then used to kill Ashling. A forensic expert concluded that Ashling was killed with a small serrated knife, as the wounds had jagged edges. The man was seen again on surveillance footage at around 2:55 p.m., just as Ashling began training on the trail. Police discovered that the suspect had been wandering around the area, apparently looking for victims, as he occasionally focused on different women. He followed these women at a distance but lost interest until he came across Ashling, whom he decided to attack. Unfortunately, the surveillance cameras did not capture high-quality images that could help identify the criminal. Hours after the attack, a suspect was arrested based on information from witnesses. The suspect, Griot Keegan, is a 39-year-old Romanian immigrant who has lived in Ireland for 23 years and has no criminal record. He matched the person seen on surveillance cameras and found near the scene of the attack. At the police station, he vehemently denied any involvement in the incident. While police were questioning him, police obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched his house, but found no evidence of his guilt. Griot maintained that there had been a mistake. He provided an alibi that was verified. He had been in a store making a purchase, which was confirmed by his receipt and surveillance footage. After that, he was seen walking along the south bank of the canal while the murder occurred on the north bank. The suspect's fingerprints and DNA samples were collected to compare with skin particles found under the Ashling's nails and on the bicycle, but there was no match. This confirmed that he was not involved in the crime. He was cleared of all suspicions and released. However, for some time, he and his family received threats as local residents still viewed him as a murderer. He was temporarily provided with alternative housing, and the police issued a public statement clarifying that Griot was not connected to the crime. Only after this did the public stop harassing him. This case received wide publicity across the country. The local community was outraged by the attack on Ashling and called on the police to quickly identify and arrest the perpetrators responsible for the tragic death of a talented young woman in broad daylight. For days, police have been trying to piece together clues, and the situation has taken a surprising turn. On the evening following the attack, a 30-year-old man named Josef Puska was admitted to a hospital in Dublin with abdominal injuries. Josef was originally from a small village in Slovakia. He left school at 16 without finishing his education and spent most of his life working as a laborer in the Czech Republic. Although he faced challenges in his lifestyle and at school, Josef was not involved with bad influences, had no criminal record, and was generally seen as a positive individual. In 2015, he moved to Dublin, Ireland, where he and his wife planned to settle permanently. He continued his work as a builder, and during their time there, they welcomed 5 children. Everything seemed to be going well until he suffered a back injury at work. After his recovery, Josef found that he could not return to his previous activities. The back injury was more severe than he had anticipated, leading him to receive disability benefits. He spent a significant amount of time in the hospital, and afterward, he relied on state support. The financial situation was tight, so his wife had to work. Joseph had limited proficiency in Irish and struggled with English, which made it difficult for him to communicate with medical staff. When he went to the hospital the day after Aisling's murder, he needed an interpreter for assistance. Thanks to the interpreter, Joseph explained that he was in Blanchardstown the previous day, January 12th. He took a taxi there and noticed he was being followed as soon as he arrived, but he did not think much of it since it was daytime. Suddenly, the attackers assaulted him, stabbing him multiple times in the stomach before they ran away. He managed to get home, where he informed his family about the incident and called for an ambulance. Doctors discovered cuts on Joseph's hands, signs of defensive wounds. He had multiple stab wounds in his abdomen and received painkillers before a 2-hour surgery. The surgery was completed around 10 o'clock. The doctors concluded that Joseph's injuries were from stab wounds inflicted by a small knife, but they were not life-threatening. He remained in the hospital for several days to recover. As part of their protocol, the doctors informed the police about the incident. Officers came to speak with Joseph, who was the victim of another attack. Police suspected that the same criminal who attacked Aisling might also be responsible for Joseph's injuries. During the conversation, Joseph's behavior became increasingly awkward and suspicious. He seemed confused, struggled to recall simple details, and appeared noticeably nervous. Police began to question whether this unemployed man could be connected to Aisling's murder. The next day, the police returned to the hospital to continue questioning and gather more details. This time, Joseph gave more specific answers. He explained that he had taken a taxi to the city to meet a woman he had met online. Joseph then revealed that he was married with 5 children but did not want his wife to know about his secret encounters. It was later discovered that he had registered on several dating websites and was regularly seeing different women. His wife remained unaware of his affair, as Joseph was very careful to keep it a secret. The police asked Joseph if he owned a bicycle. He replied that he had a green bicycle that he had used for a long time. However, when they inquired whether he had been riding it on the day of the murder, Joseph started to stutter and claimed that his bicycle had been stolen over 2 weeks ago. He had not reported the theft to the police, which raised suspicions. Joseph then appeared increasingly anxious, prompting police to leave his hospital room. The police also discovered that he had been near the canal around 6 p.m. that same day. They obtained a warrant to search his apartment, allowing them to collect his clothing and mobile phone for forensic analysis. They called Joseph to inform him of this. Sensing something was amiss, he directly asked the police, through an interpreter, if he was a suspect. The officers reassured him that they were merely trying to clarify the situation and needed to conduct an examination. This conversation occurred over the phone. After the police answered, Joseph paused for a long moment. Then he turned to the translator and asked him to accurately relay his words to the police officer. Joseph admitted that he had killed the girl by the canal, but he insisted that it was unintentional and an accident. Later Joseph addressed the police directly. He explained that he was riding his bicycle along a path when he encountered an unfamiliar girl. He had a knife in his hand and accidentally cut her in the neck after losing his balance. She became angry, which frightened Joseph, and he claimed he struck her in the stomach with an object that resembled a knife. He said he tried to remain calm, hoping the girl would settle down. However, she began screaming and threatening him even more, forcing Joseph to defend himself. He then attacked her, repeatedly stabbing her in the neck with his knife. She fought back desperately, but he was able to overpower her. The police were taken aback by his phone confession, finding the story hard to believe. It seemed implausible that Joseph could accidentally stab the victim in the neck before she attacked him. They questioned how Aisling could have had a knife. Yosef expressed fear of retaliation. He believed that if Aisling's friends and relatives learned of the incident, they might harm his children and wife. He asked the police to keep the names of his family members confidential. The police assured Yosef that he would not face prosecution as he would soon be arrested and put on trial. After being discharged from hospital, he was immediately arrested for murder. Afterward, the Yosef changed his story and refused to confess. Despite this, the prosecutor's office viewed him as the only person who could have harmed Aisling that day. They decided to seek the maximum punishment for the murderer. The initial trial date was set for June 2023, but there were several delays, and it wasn't until October 2023 that the prosecution presented the case to the jury. During the trial, prosecutors played surveillance footage showing an attacker who looked like Yosef cycling along a path near the canal for hours before targeting Aisling. His actions were typical of a predator looking for prey. Forensic experts found traces of DNA under Aisling's fingernails, suggesting she fought back and injured her attacker. DNA from tissue samples matched Yosef, and his fingerprints were found on a green bicycle. All witnesses who saw the attacker that day identified him as Yosef. New evidence emerged during the investigation, particularly from one of Yosef's friends, a Slovakian bus driver. On the night of January 12, while working, he encountered Yosef, who had severe scratches on his stomach. Concerned, the driver offered Yosef a ride home. Yosef mentioned he had gotten into a fight but did not provide details about the incident. During the drive, the bus driver repeatedly questioned Yosef about what had happened, but Yosef avoided giving clear answers and kept holding his stomach, which was bleeding. The driver grew increasingly worried, suspecting that the injuries might be linked to the ethnic cleansing events happening at that time, as there were widespread expressions of hatred against other nationalities. To deflect his friend's questions, Yosef concocted a story about being attacked by a masked man, claiming he couldn't identify the attacker because he hadn't seen his face before and didn't know him. Yosef attempted to portray himself as a hero, claiming he had seen a masked stranger attacking a woman near the canal. Yosef claimed he was stabbed multiple times as he tried to approach the bleeding girl. He became frightened when he realized what had happened and then fled. Despite being suspected of murder, he began to insist that he was actually the savior, having been injured in a fight with the real attacker. However, this new account does not clarify how his DNA was found under Aisling's fingernails or his fingerprints on the green bike he left behind. Yosef's defense argued that his false confession about the attack on Aisling resulted from the painkillers he received in the hospital, which caused him to feel euphoric and led him to speak to himself. Yosef stated that he was under the influence of these drugs when the police began their interrogation. However, doctors who treated Yosef contradicted this claim. They stated that he only received a minimal dose of the medication, meaning it could not have significantly affected him by the time he made his confession. The prosecution highlighted that Yosef had changed his testimony multiple times, making his statements unreliable. However, this posed a challenge for the prosecution because Yosef had no history of violence, especially against women. There were no indications of aggression or cruelty in his behavior, and he had no connection to Aisling, raising questions about his motive for the attack. The prosecution argued that the incident was not a result of personal issues. The trial lasted 3 weeks, after which a jury of 12 members returned their verdict. They deliberated for 3 hours before finding Yosef Puska guilty of the murder of Aisling Murphy. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The circumstances surrounding Aisling's murder shocked the nation. Just days after the tragedy, protests were held across Ireland in support of the victim's family, and the case shocked the nation. During the investigation, police determined that Yosef had attacked Aisling without any apparent motive. He did not know her. He appeared to be a predator who had been searching for a victim for hours. Unfortunately, Aisling fell victim to a monster. Welcome back. Detectives, let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Menqi Ji. In 2012, Menqi Ji, a Chinese citizen, enrolled at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, where she earned a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. One of her professors was impressed by her expertise and offered her a job at biomaterials company. While working there, Menqi met her future husband, Joe Elledge, in September 2015, as he was pursuing his engineering studies. They both worked at the same company, where Menqi was Joe's boss. Their feelings for each other grew quickly, and just a year and 7 months after their first meeting, Joe proposed to Menqi on September 22, 2017, on a trail at Rock Bridge Memorial State Park, called the Devil's Refrigerator. They got married only 2 weeks later. Menqi's parents think they rushed into marriage due to the impending expiration of Menqi's visa. They felt that American citizens couldn't fully grasp the difficulty that immigrants face. Although Menqi is financially independent, but she still has difficulty obtaining citizenship. After nearly 5 months, Menqi received a promotion at work. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Menqi and Joe decided that she should decline the promotion and leave her job to focus entirely on motherhood, even though she was the primary breadwinner for their family at that time. Their income decreased significantly, but it was sufficient for their essential needs. In October 2018, Joe and Menqi's family gave birth to their first daughter. However, after her birth, Menqi and Joe began to face difficulties. Although their marriage appeared normal to outsiders, only Menqi's parents were aware of the reality. After quitting her job, Menqi felt completely isolated. She doesn't communicate with anyone. Her small child became her only companion, along with daily phone calls from her mother. Traditionally, Menqi's parents had to travel from China to the United States before she gave birth, to help care for and support her. They lived in a separate house nearby and visited Menqi daily, but their appearance increased tension between Menqi and her husband, Joe. On October 9, 2019, a year after Menqi's daughter was born, Menqi's parents were alarmed when they didn't receive a call from her. Unable to reach her, they sent a family friend who lived close by to check on Menqi. When the friend arrived, Joe answered the door and revealed that Menqi was missing. He shared a troubling account. On the evening of October 8, he had tried to give Menqi a massage and flirt with her, but she rejected him, saying she needed sleep because she had important plans for the next day. Joe stated that he woke up the next morning to find Menqi gone. She had left behind her car keys, mobile phone, wallet, and, most importantly, did not take their daughter with her. Despite her absence, Joe did not immediately report her missing, believing she was simply out for a walk and would return. A family friend attempted to call Menqi but was unsuccessful. Eventually, under pressure, Joe reported her disappearance to the police, but rather than calling 911, he reached out to the non-emergency number 311. Menqi's parents were unaware of this and were convinced the police were actively searching for their daughter. On October 15, 2019, a week after Menqi went missing, her husband, Joe Elledge, reported her disappearance to the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. He recounted to detectives the same information he had shared with a family friend. Joe described Menqi as appearing stressed the night before she went missing. He mentioned that she went to bed after telling him she had important matters to attend to the next morning. When he asked her 3 times who she was meeting, she did not provide clear answers. He suspected she might be having an affair and secretly meeting another man. Later that day, Joe informed investigators that he had discovered notes on Menqi's computer discussing an affair. Joe said Menqi texted a man from China. The message ended with her expressing sadness that her husband was not interested in her. Joe speculated that Menqi might have left him for this man, potentially abandoning their daughter for a new life. He expressed his love for their daughter and his desire for Menqi to return home safely. From the outset, investigators were skeptical of Joe's account and considered him a suspect. Joe's family hired a lawyer, who revealed that Menchi and the man China with had intimate and emotional conversations via text messages. The main question is whether Menchi went to see the man who lives in China, and where she is now. The police found out that Joe, upon realizing his wife was missing, did not call 911, but instead contacted 311. This made them even more suspicious of him. He willingly returned to the Columbia Police Department for further questioning. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious of his account, particularly when Joe mentioned taking long drives to find new walking spots instead of searching for his missing wife. Additionally, it was noted that Joe closed the door before leaving their apartment. It seemed like Joe didn't care how Menchi got home, especially since her phone keys were left behind. Menchi didn't drive the car. Detectives had suspicions, but they found no evidence to prove Joe was involved in his wife's disappearance, no blood, weapons, witnesses, or body. Furthermore, there was no indication that Menchi ran away to meet another man in China. They also confirmed that Menchi had not booked any flights. From the start, it was clear that Menchi would never have abandoned her beloved daughter. Menchi's parents refused to accept this hypothesis and insisted that she was a loving mother. When detectives spoke with Joe, they asked for his phone number, which he willingly provided. Inside his phone, investigators discovered something alarming: over 10 hours of secretly recorded conversations with his wife, in which Joe expressed his dissatisfaction with their marriage and his desire for a divorce. He also discussed plans to send his wife back to China. However, this discovery was minor compared to the nearly 4.5 hours of recordings found on Menchi's phone. In these conversations, the true nature of Joe emerged. He threatened his wife, referred to himself as God, and demanded that her parents stay away from their home. It was chilling. The Joe family's issues started a few weeks before Menchi gave birth. Her parents traveled from China to support their daughter, following a tradition where grandparents help with the baby for 100 days. This custom bothered Joe immensely, as he had a strong dislike for Menchi's parents. What really angered Joe was that Menchi tried to fight him back, and she said that she needed her parents. She loved them very much and needed their help taking care of the newborn. When Menchi had just given birth, the relationship between her and her husband became very tense, and they argued a lot. Menchi's mother mentioned that Joe disliked it when Menchi spoke Chinese around him because he barely understood the language. Joe interpreted everything they said as hurtful and negative towards him. Eventually, when Menchi's father could no longer tolerate the situation and returned to China, Joe felt relieved and seeing it as his personal victory. Now, he only had to manage his mother-in-law and reassert his authority in the home. Menchi's mother made Chinese dumplings for Joe's birthday, but he didn't like the way she used the cutting board. This sparked a heated argument between Joe and her. Joe angrily demanded that she leave his house for good. Menchi's mother, who believed in maintaining harmony because of her Confucian values, chose not to confront Joe and did not defend herself against his harsh words. Menchi pleaded with Joe to allow her mother to stay because she needed her mother's support, but Joe only replied with insults and foul language. Joe told Menchi was incompetent solely because she was a woman. Joe attempted to manipulate and control her. He even threatened Menchi's mother, claiming he would harm her. This left Menchi's mother in shock. She didn't understand why Joe was so angry with both her and Menchi. Feeling helpless, Menchi sought help from Joe's mother, who quickly lost her temper and drove 2 hours to address the family conflict. However, even with his mother present, Joe couldn't hide his disdain for his mother-in-law. He demanded that she kneel and bow to him. Although Joe eventually apologized to her, he still insisted that she leave before the 100-day mark. Consequently, Menchi's mother returned to China. In October 2019, Menchi disappeared. Detectives believed that serious family conflicts made her feel trapped, especially regarding her immigration status. Just 5 months prior, she had to attend another interview to apply for citizenship. 2 weeks after Minchi's disappearance, the Columbia Police Department opened a criminal investigation into the case. On the same day, 16 days after she went missing, police arrested Joe Elledge on suspicion of child abuse. Joe confessed to physically abusing his 1-year-old daughter, claiming it was a form of discipline. Before Minchi went missing, she told her mother that she had seen bruises on her daughter and suspected Joe was the cause. Her mother advised her to report Joe to the police, but Minchi never had the opportunity to do so. Joe's lawyer claimed this was merely an attempt to get Joe imprisoned. He argued that Joe made a mistake, emphasizing that he is a young single father who might have erred. Joe was released on bail, while his mother assisted him and cared for her granddaughter. Meanwhile, detectives continued to gather evidence against Joe, convinced that he was involved in Minchi's disappearance. On October 25, 2019, police obtained a search warrant and entered the apartment. Joe had been missing for just over 2 weeks. During the search, they collected Minchi's backpack and notes that Joe had written to help himself prepare for questions from reporters and investigators. Detectives thoroughly searched the apartment for any evidence and, following a hunch, they also took a pair of dirty boots for examination, but they found nothing significant. On the same day, Joe Elledge was arrested on suspicion of child abuse after fresh bruises were discovered on the girl's body. Meanwhile, the search for Minchi has become a search for her remains, because no one believes she is still alive. Detectives carefully tracked all movements of Joe's car and phone. However, every lead they followed led to dead ends in this complex case. As a result, the detective made the decision to charge Joe Elledge with first-degree murder, even without a body. These charges were filed while Joe was still in jail on child abuse allegations. Meanwhile, detectives continued their efforts to locate Minchi. Phone records indicated that Joe was away for 30 minutes on the day he reported her missing, a fact he did not share with investigators. When the detectives searched that location, they found nothing. After months of searching, the police were still unable to find Minchi. Her mother traveled to the United States to help with the search, convinced that her daughter's body was nearby. Over the following months, the police conducted regular searches in the area, and Minchi's mother held a memorial by the river. A year later, while Joe was still awaiting his trial, a tourist was walking in the park where Joe had proposed to Minchi. He noticed something shiny in the mud and discovered it was a wallet. Upon closer inspection, he saw a pair of shoes and then what looked like a human skull. He immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the remains were those of Minchi. Her parents learned that their daughter had died, but the circumstances surrounding her death were still unclear. Much time had passed, and even forensic experts could not determine the cause of death. They found unnatural damage to her bones, including 4 broken ribs, indicating she had suffered a strong blow to the back. Detectives began to piece together a theory about what happened to Minchi, focusing on the evidence collected after her disappearance. They noted that Joe's cell phone records indicated he was near the location where Minchi was found on the day he reported her missing. On the day Minchi disappeared, it had been raining. Key evidence included Joe's dirty boots. The dirt and gravel on the soles, along with foliage, were sent to the Missouri Botanical Garden for analysis. The lab carefully removed juniper tree needles from the boots for DNA testing. A lab worker then climbed nearby juniper trees, numbered each, and collected fresh needles from the highest branches. These samples were preserved and compared with the needles found on Joe's shoes, revealing a DNA match. On November 1, 2021, Joe Elledge's trial for the murder of his wife, Minchi, began. with compelling evidence that Joe was present at the scene where Mingqi's body was discovered on the day she went missing, including DNA from the trees and geolocation data. However, his lawyer presented a new narrative. The lawyer claimed that Joe did kill his wife, but insisted it was a tragic accident. Due to evidence from the juniper tree and its DNA, Joe could no longer assert that Mingqi had run away. He had to confess that he buried her in a shallow grave. Joe stated that he was aware of his wife's communication with a man from China, and they had an argument that night. Feeling upset and hurt, he wanted to take their daughter for a walk. Mingqi rushed towards him, intending to take the child, but Joe pushed her away. She fell against the table, injured her ribs, and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she went to bed. In the morning, when the child started crying, Mingqi did not wake up. Joe then realized she had passed away in her sleep. He claimed that his wife had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself, asserting it was self-defense. However, this explanation seemed highly questionable. Joe was twice the size of his wife, making it unlikely that she could have attacked him, and after sustaining such a severe injury, she would not have been able to get up and walk to the bed. The prosecutor argued that the evidence, particularly the 4 broken ribs, suggested Joe's account was fabricated. This injury indicated she had suffered a brutal beating. The prosecutor alleged that it was premeditated murder driven by months of escalating anger. Joe harbored hatred for his wife. In court, the prosecutor presented secret audio recordings between the couple to reveal the true dynamics of their relationship. These recordings helped clarify the motive behind the crime. No evidence of Mingqi communicating with other men was ever found. On November 11, 2021, after nearly 7 hours of discussion, the jury reached a verdict. They found Joe Elledge guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Mingqi and Joe's daughter currently lives with Joe's mother, but Mingqi's parents are pursuing joint custody of their 4-year-old granddaughter. Joe's lawyer argues that while the child will always have a relationship with her Chinese grandparents, she should stay in the care of Joe's mother for her safety. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Steven Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Steven worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Steven admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Brianna, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Steven repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Steven lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, but Steven, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Steven didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Steven led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Steven, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Steven was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Brianna. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Steven called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Steven's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Steven family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Steven called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Steven explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Steven appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Steven took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Steven refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Steven's last call to Brianna was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Steven claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Steven inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Steven time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Steven called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Steven claimed he found these items in a drawer of Brianna's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, this medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Brianna. Brittany was sure that Steven was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Steven showed Brittany another drawer that had Brianna's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Steven might have been involved in Brianna's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Brianna, despite strong objections from Steven's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Brianna couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Brianna body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Steven, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Steven did not speak to anyone or offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Steven bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Steven. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Steven continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after Brianna's death, Steven's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Steven rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Steven showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna's family is concerned that Steven's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Steven is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Steven's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Steven became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Steven was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Steven's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances, including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna's family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. At the funeral, Steven did not give a farewell speech to his wife, and he chose to remain silent. Brianna's family observed that he displayed no signs of regret or sadness, appearing completely indifferent. This was surprising, especially considering that only 6 months earlier, he had grieved the loss of a friend for nearly a week, yet the death of his wife seemed to have no effect on him.